Hello, and welcome to the Nebraska Department of Education Positive Behavior Intervention and Support 10-Minute Tidbit. Today's topic is Alternatives to Exclusionary Discipline. My name is Heather Robbins, and I'll be your host throughout the 10-Minute Tidbit series. Our purpose with the 10-Minute Tidbits is to provide Nebraska K-12 school teams assistance with installation, initial implementation, and full implementation of PBIS on their campuses. We hope that these brief video vignettes support you in your implementation efforts. Today's topic is Alternatives to Exclusionary Discipline. We hope that by the end of our short time together, you're able to discover the impact of exclusionary practices, describe some alternatives to exclusion, and consider next steps for your campus. According to the School Discipline Support Initiative, exclusionary discipline describes any type of school disciplinary action that removes or excludes a student from his or her usual educational setting. What does this mean nationally? During the 2015 to 2016 school year, there were 11 million days of instruction lost to out-of-school suspension. Some more exclusionary discipline by the numbers, which means people. Preschool children are 3 times more likely to be suspended than K-12 students. African American children represent 18% of the preschool population, but are suspended at a rate of 50%. Ninth graders who are suspended are 3 times more likely to drop out. 75% of students with disabilities are suspended at least once in secondary school. African American students are 4 times more likely to be suspended than white students. African American boys with disabilities, 19% representation, are suspended at a rate of 36%. What does this mean for Nebraska? During the 2019 to 2020 school year in Nebraska, for students in special education, there were 4,083 out-of-school suspension instances, averaging 7.5 days in length. And there were 3,634 in-school suspension instances, averaging 3 days in length. If we just do the math on these averages, that means there were 31,000 days of instruction lost to out-of-school suspension and 10,500 days to in-school suspension for students with disabilities. What's the impact of exclusionary discipline? Suspension is the #1 predictor that children will drop out of school. Other impacts include lowered academic performance, undermined trust between staff and students, increased involvement of youth in criminal justice, and unimproved safety outcomes. So what are some alternatives to exclusionary discipline? Behavior contracts are an alternative to exclusionary discipline. A behavior contract that represents a good alternative to exclusionary discipline is developed with the student and should include the expected student behaviors, realistic ones, skills the students can use to help them achieve the goal of their behavior contract, how school staff members will help the students achieve the goal of their behavior contract, and reinforcement for the student achieving the goal of their behavior contract. This type of contract is different than a contract that says, Student A, you will come to school tomorrow and follow all the rules. This is a collaborative contract that is intended for instruction and growth and improvement so the student can be successful and achieve the goal of the contract. Skill courses are an alternative to exclusionary discipline. They could be guided or independent study, and they could be on a specific skill or a specific topic. For instance, they might be on bullying, or they might be on managing conflict. The skill courses could include research. They might include readings for the student, videos for the student to view. They might include reflection assignments. They might also include a summative test, report, or a presentation on the skill. Self-management, self-monitoring plans are an alternative to exclusionary discipline. With self-management plans, students learn to measure their own behavior. It begins by teaching the expectation that's required for the student, creating a rubric for the expectation, determining when the student would score the rubric, teaching the student to self-score, and then reinforcing the student and/or teaching the student to self-reinforce for reaching their goals. Self-management plans are an alternative to exclusionary discipline. Alternative schedules may be an option for some students. At elementary level, an alternative schedule may look like an AM/PM schedule. In secondary school, alternative schedules may be flexible in a different way, perhaps having to do with when courses are taken, when electives are taken, at chunks of time, as long as it's presented as an alternative to the schedule, the regular schedule. Community service projects are an excellent practice to engage in terms of an alternative to exclusion. With a community service practice, the student does something that really improves their community. And this helps them. They research, they learn about their community, they determine what they're going to be doing, and they do it. And this helps them become more connected to their community, more connected to the school, and it helps the school and the community become more connected as well. Community service is an alternative to exclusionary discipline. Restorative practices and restorative justice can be alternatives. Restorative practice provides a whole school framework that promotes the building of a positive community, responds to challenging behaviors, and repairs relationships that have been harmed. Restorative justice is a process whereby all parties with a stake in a particular offense come together to resolve collectively how to deal with the aftermath of the offense and its implications for the future. Restorative practice and restorative justice go well together. It's important to have restorative practices in place where you're working on building that positive community, working on how you're going to respond, working on repairing relationships in small ways before you ever look at implementing restorative justice. They go very well together, and you begin with restorative practices. Loss of privileges may be an alternative to exclusion. Could include a temporary loss of sports, clubs, parking, or other privileges. In-school suspension, Saturday detention, revisioned, can be an alternative to exclusionary discipline. In the re-envisioned ISS or Saturday school, there may be mini lessons, social skill instruction, apology letters, restitution plans, and/or parent training. Re-envisioned ISS, not an in-school suspension or Saturday school where the student puts their head down, but rather a place of instruction, restoration, a place that gets the student back on track, ready to return to class, ready to be involved in instruction. Remember, the purpose of an ISS or Saturday school is to help the student return to the classroom successfully. Here are some to-dos for you to consider. Discuss when how you would share the impact of exclusionary discipline with your staff. Determine what alternatives you already have in place and what alternatives you would like to pursue and how you could make them systematic. We hope that in our short time together, you've been able to discover the impact of exclusionary practices, that you can describe some alternatives to exclusion, and that you consider next steps for your campus so we can include students, keep them in school, in instruction on our campus. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next 10-minute tidbit.